Hi everyone, I'm back with another video from the Diablo 3 Season 29 PTR, and I want to talk about what to expect from the season as a whole. So we have seen a few build changes. For example, here you can see the newly revamped Eric here, Chicken Witch Doctor, that is actually pretty good now. There's also some buffs to Crusaders, for example. But outside of that, we have the seasonal theme that is I'm playing here right now. And we have a Paragon Cap of 800. You can only assign 800 points. You can farm more than that, but they don't do anything. But they will eventually roll over to non-season. And this will significantly change how the game is played on like a meta level. So what I mean is that, well, the one thing that everyone was usually striving for was farm as much experience per hour as possible. And that has become completely obsolete. So if the Paragon Cap stays as it is at 800, or even if they raise it slightly, it won't really matter. The point is that Paragon farming is dead in Season 29. So this is something you just don't do. You don't go on the higher GR tiers, you don't really do like 4-man speed meta and all that stuff. I mean, there is the advantage that you can loot share in parties, but outside of that, there's not really any benefit. And we also have the solo self-farm mode coming into the game now. So that I guess a lot of people will actually play that and not even have access to group play. So this leaves us with two very important avenues of progression that you can pursue besides farming XP, because everyone is just gonna hit Paragon 800 by default basically after playing for a little bit. And that's number one, better gear, and number two, better gems. So you have to put a focus on leveling your main gems in particular, because just like blasting through GR 150 is not really going to be an easy thing to do anymore without the altar and without real power creep this season. So, you know, having 150 gems will be quite the achievement. But you can also level your augments, for example. You get 125 gems from the Echoing Nightmares, and you can level those further as well. And when you're capped at 800 paragons, then leveling your augments even just a little bit further is already a noticeable benefit. But outside of that, you also have the gear farm. And the gear farm, well, the most effective way to do that is either with bounties or with just completing Greater Rifts as fast as possible. In particular, Greater Rift 90. This is the strategy that I have already pursued many seasons, and I've already talked about them in the past, but I guess more than ever, this is going to be the main strategy to farm gear in this season. So at GR90, you get the maximum amount of loot. You get, I believe it's 12 items on the Rift Guardian when you finish the run. And almost all of them will be legendary or set items. So there's barely any like blue or yellow items or something like that anymore at that point. Going slightly higher than GR90 does still have like a very slight like benefit with a little bit extra blood shards and a little bit more magic find, so that occasionally you get like one fewer random yellow item or so. But in the end, it's so minuscule that you just go GR90 as fast as possible, and that is the goal. So you better get ready for the Super Mario Kart season, especially with the newly buffed Crusader here, where you just like chill on the horse and everything dies around you, and you go as fast as possible through those runs. You want to do those 1-minute rifts or faster, and whatever build you play, whatever class you play, you want to go for this GR90 goal and just make like the fastest speed farming setup. So this might be such a prevalent thing that we actually might make like some real tier list for this, with like, you know, the top builds mentioned or something like that. Every class does have some really fast builds, so there's nothing really to worry about depending on which class you play. Yeah, there might be some that will be a bit faster than others, but they might have other perks, like they can, like, for example, more easily push higher or so. But in the end, these 1-minute runs is what you're striving for. So you don't want to do any kind of like difficult content. The season theme itself is also not really hard because it's only like T16 content, and apparently it does scale up the difficulty a little bit, but not really by much. If you follow this GR90 strategy and you don't really have much downtime, let's say 30 to 40 seconds between the runs, then you can farm upwards of like 400 plus Forgotten Souls an hour. And that allows you to also use your bounty materials to reforge your gear and try to maximize it the best way possible. On the other hand, maximizing your gear actually won't be that difficult unless you're playing like an LOD build, because with the low Paragon Cap of 800, the Guardian set actually becomes a lot more like usable now for a lot of builds. So previously this was only something that you used like in the early season, in the early days, just to like get a bit of a boost for the main stat. But then over time it would just like get phased out basically from the Paragon gains, where you have more and more main stat on your core stats. Now this is not the case anymore, and Guardian set is actually going to be very powerful for many builds. So I'm gonna talk about this in another video as well. But what that does is that it makes the gear hunt a lot easier actually, because previously you always needed to find like, you know, rings without main stat and then amulets without main stat. But now when you have the Guardian set included in your build, it's actually fine to have main stat. It's not really such a downside, and in some cases even the best in slot stat. And the same goes for much more difficult to find pieces like gloves without main stat, for example. The so-called quad factor gloves that have like crit damage, crit chance, area damage, cooldown or something like that. So very often after, let's say, 2, 3, 4k paragons or so, people would try to aim for those items that don't have main stat. But since main stat is actually a guaranteed roll on most of those pieces, it is very difficult to find items where you can roll off the main stat, because everything else needs to be perfect already, and then the last stat is getting replaced. Now with the Guardian set at low Paragon, that is actually not the way anymore. So instead, you actually keep main stat, and it's a good stat that you want to have, which makes gearing up much faster and much easier, to the point where you can probably get like, you know, really solid high-end gear for this Paragon 800 scenario in as little as like 10 to 30 hours or something like that, where previously that was probably more in the range of like 50 to 100 hours because of some of those pieces being really difficult to get. And the great part is that the season theme itself also greatly synergizes with this whole strategy of GR90 farm. You get a lot of Forgotten Souls, and then you want to convert that into reforges with bounty materials. And well, the season theme actually gives you a lot of those. So every time you find one of those portals, you run through X many levels, so it can be as little as 1, it can go up to, I don't know, 15 levels deep or something like that. And you get more and more rewards. So there's also like some kind of like loot pinata here with more Forgotten Souls. And you can actually just like kind of target farm this stuff as well, just for like lots of loot, I guess. So I'll do some more testing to see like how much loot you can actually get here versus the GR90 grind. Maybe this is actually just a better way of farming loot. But at the end of each of those runs, you get 40 of each bounty material. So you can see this here, there's always like this goblin at the end, and then this goblin spawns the chest, and this marks the end of the run. And here you have 40 bounty mats. And this is almost double of what a full bounty run gives you, doing all 5 acts. So especially for the solo self-farm players, this will be incredible, and much faster than what you could otherwise do. So the only reason to do bounties is like to get the plans very early on, to actually craft a Guardian set, for example, and stuff like that. And maybe get like some of those items like the Ring of Our Grandeur. And outside of that, you're probably not really going to touch bounties. You're just going to go out of town, kind of start a bounty, or just go like to whatever we find as the best zone to find those portals. And then you go straight into those portals and you rush through to the end, get the loot, get the bounty mats, and you're out. And this means that you can just do tons of reforges and gear up extremely quickly in Season 29. So the bottom line of the Season 29 is that without a massive raise and a Paragon Cap, which I don't see happening now, this is going to be a very short-lived season actually for most people. But on the other hand, I guess a lot of more casual players will definitely enjoy that, being able to kind of max out the character really quickly, being kind of on an equal level with the blasters. And for me personally, I also kind of like the idea of having such a season, having such a cap in place, where, well, there are all those different leaderboards, and I can just, you know, pick a few of them, gear up for, you know, this or that set, and then compete with others on almost the same level. I think it's going to be very fun, at least for people that want to try to be a bit competitive. But for the people that really like that long-term grind, that like the, you know, gearing up, you know, over hundreds of hours and farming paragons over hundreds of hours, yeah, for those, I guess it's not going to be quite the season. But we'll see how it will play out. The competition part is definitely really exciting, I think. So that's what I have here for now. I'm going to keep you guys updated with more Season 29 videos. So stay tuned for a few build guides and some other like leveling guides, etc. All that is going to come in due time. And you're going to be well prepared for when the season launches, which should be sometime in like mid-September. So that's it. Hope you like this, and see you guys next time.